up, and I'm happy to continue. In the meanwhile, Rohan, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What is it that you do? And if you've been here on the show before and I've forgotten, my deepest apologies. But tell me what it is that you do, and that'll actually help me tailor my talk. And in the meanwhile, I am just going to mute my notifications. You're doing your master's, and what are you doing your master's in, Rohan? Thank you, Team Creator, for giving us that heads up. We'll just wait for Rohan to tell us what's he doing his master's in, and then we will jump right in. And Meena, also you're doing them in finance. It's one subject which I have really taught myself how to think about. It was not a strength. It's not a natural strength, is what I should say. For me, finance used to mean someone has to shop to make the economy run, till I became wiser. So, of course, in my younger days, I wasn't at least as clued into finance means a whole lot more than just shopping and saving. Thank you so much, Team Creator, for letting us know that the stream is now live and on LinkedIn as well. So I'm hoping it's also there on whatever other socials it needs to get to. Good evening, everyone. I hope it's a good Friday evening. I hope you've had a great week and you're looking forward to the weekend ahead. Don't forget to stay safe. I know the weekend is looming and very tempting, but don't forget to keep your masks on, keep your social distancing on, and keep your hand hygiene groove on. Hi, Rajesh. We haven't yet started, so you're just in time. Good to have you all over here. I can see Rajesh, Meena, and Rohan on the chat. If there's anyone else, please pop in and say hello. It's nice to know there are more of you listening in. Hi, Sid. Sid, I remember from the last week as well. Hello. So for everyone who's logged in, and hi, Balaji. Anyone who's logged in from different places, if you're logged in right now, if you're logging in some time, at some point of time in the future, my name is Shalu Butcher, and I'm a few different things. I'm a coach, I'm an entrepreneur. I run a small little firm which has, I run a small little firm which has 3 other firms to it. So yes, I think that possibly makes me fancy myself to be an entrepreneur. And therefore, everything that I speak about between now and all the other strategy planning sessions that we have in the series, I do speak a little bit from experience, a little bit from knowledge, a little bit from shared wisdom, I should say that, and a whole lot from getting myself, kicked when I did not create a strategy and when I was just going with the flow, as they say. Hi, Virat. Good to have you here. Balaji, Virat, Rajesh, if you all could just tell me a little bit about what it is that you do, I can tailor my conversation accordingly. Anyone who's logged in on social media, please do let us know if you have any questions, any thoughts, any information that you need or you'd like to share. Team Creator is on it. They'll pass on the information to me, even if I can't look at it myself. So just moving on, the last time, as a quick recap, thank you, Team Creator. I know you're monitoring the socials. Hey, Shubham. You're a design strategist at an MNC. That's fantastic. That's good to know. And so, as you can see, everybody, strategy is not just about the big whistles. It's also about how do you create strategy for design for an organization, for example. And I'm sure Shubham will share a little bit more with us on that. It's very good to see a lot of young blood on these sessions. One, it speaks about your curiosity to learn. And the other thing, or the interesting part of what today's session is all about, is it does address how it's important for us to involve people who are young, people who are new to the role or to the organization, people who've come in from different parts of the world, when one is sitting down to create their strategy. But that was food for thought for the last session and also some part of the sessions that are coming up. Today is all about the fact that the mantle of strategic planning is on leaders. And when I say leaders right now, I don't mean only designated leaders. I also mean people who you would consider revolutionaries, within an organization, people who are considered mavericks within an organization, people who have the right ideas, people who have new ideas, people who have blazing thoughts, which then help organizations create blazing paths. But we'll come back to that in a little while. The main thing is talking about how strategic planning is the responsibility of leaders, the mantle that leaders wear or have to live up to. Why do we say that? Um, at the onset, I want to clarify that when I say leaders, I don't mean people sitting at the top. I don't mean just the CEOs and the directors and their direct reports. When we speak of leadership, I am talking about people who are, number one, in a position where they have other people who listen to them, who are influenced by them, who will do what needs to be done because this one person spoke up. That's my first definition of a leader. And that's why I also say that it is across all levels of an organization. The second part of leadership is designation, of course. You are a CEO, you are, let's say, senior manager, sales, or marketing and strategy, and so on and so forth. Or you're a manager at a mid level. Can you actually take your role, and when you look at tearing it apart, you'll realize that one part of it is, here's the vision of the organization, here are the goals, etc., that the organization has set for itself, and therefore for you and you, your department, your role, your unit, call it what you will. Therefore, how are you going to get it executed? Now, of course, this also brings into play the style of leadership that you follow. It will, are you somebody who's an authoritative leader, as it is called, the style that you follow? Are you someone who gets work done because, hey, do it because I'm the boss? Or are you someone who's at the other extreme, which is servant leadership? That's okay, let me do for you before you do for the organization. And I just said that in a sum up. Servant leadership is, as authoritative leadership, is a huge, huge scope for learning and for discussion itself. But bringing it back into what I was saying, so know that as the leader, you could be a leader in any of these areas with any of these qualifications. And therefore, when you look at creating a strategy or planning a strategy to achieve organizational, departmental, team goals, and sometimes even individual goals, but we'll explore that later. You are responsible for that strategy. You are responsible for making it stick. I'm just going to take a quick look at chat because I can suddenly, out of the periphery of my eye, I can see a lot of stuff going on there. And I'll come back to you. So Rajesh says, for other people who are not on the creator chat, I'm having trouble with one of my senior employees. Though he's a partner in my firm, he doesn't seem to be able to take ownership at all. Whenever I talk to him, he gets insecure and defensive. I know his heart is in the right place, but I find it challenging to work with him. Any advice? We'll talk about that. Vignesh wants to know, how can we know what is our leadership style? I'd like to know where I am in the spectrum between servant or authoritarian leadership. Vignesh, in the next session for sure, or one of the sessions where we discuss the different styles of leadership. If I get into that today, we can say goodbye to strategic planning. But I'd love to talk about it more at a later stage. Rajesh, I'm going to answer your question because this is more about ownership, and the solution that you may have could be very vastly different from the conversation on strategic planning. So I'll come to that in a little while. Just to kind of, give your mind a rest. One of the things you may want to do is to get this individual coached, because if you're saying his heart is in the right place, if he's a partner in your firm, it's obvious that the individual is not a junior, number one. Number two, it's also obvious that he wouldn't have gotten to the partnership place without any skills, to the partnership designation without any sort of skills at all. So whenever we're looking at an individual, we look at the skill and the will of theirs when we're looking at their performance. And if they are not performing despite having the skills, it's obviously a will issue. So that, especially at a partner level, you can address via coaching with a good coach. I'm happy to talk to you more about that. So I hope that kind of satiates your instant response need, and then we'll discuss it later in detail as well. Last week we discussed some components of what goes into strategy. Hope we'll be covering that. Not today, Sid. We will be looking at that. Perhaps if there's more required, then send me your questions and I'm happy to answer them. Today we're talking about how it's the responsibility of leadership. A lot of times what happens is leaders who are either not designated or who consider themselves to be way low down in the food chain, and you'll be surprised that this also sometimes happens at CEO minus one level, saying, "But I'm not responsible for strategy. My boss is." Or what is my role, especially in the Indian context? Our our cultural tenets, our cultural baggage, so to speak, that we carry, and that may not be the best term to use, but our cultural tenets kind of make us believe if my boss has said something, and even if I know better, I'd better keep my mouth shut. And yet, the mantle of that strategic planning, that is your responsibility as a leader, whatever level of designated or otherwise leadership that you're at, your ability to handle your boss, your ability to handle authority is a key part, is a large part of your role as a leader. Are you able to create a bridge between those who are going to follow and implement that strategy and those who are creating it? If you're not the first point of creation yourself, are you able to take the strategy and simplify it and then cascade it further? Those are some of the things that I want to speak about today. So the idea is, can you, first take a step back and ask yourself, do I even believe strategy and strategic planning to be a part of my role as a leader? If you don't, you may want to go back and check, why am I not doing this? What is my role as a leader? Is my role as a leader to roll up my sleeves and do the tasks myself? Is my role as a leader to take a step back and say, okay, here's the larger picture, here's the shorter picture, what's the bridge in between, what do I need to do? Or are you someone who's really able to take a good leap backwards and say, all right, what needs to be done for us to shift, for us to transform, for us to change things, for us to achieve our goals? As a leader, that's your responsibility. Thinking is one of your responsibilities. Listening to what's going on the ground. These are also skills that you use. Last week, before we signed off, I had invited people to look at this tool called Pestle, which is about how do you scan your environment if you have to make a good strategy? How do you scan your environment that gives you the inputs on what all do we need to do, what all do I need to do, what all could be blocking me, what all are my leverage points, what is to be used in the political scenario, in the economic scenario, in the environment, in the technology, in the social scenario, and so on and so forth, the entire opening up of Pestle. And I'm just going to put that down. I think I put it down in the chat last time, but here you go again. Pestle is a very important tool. Another very important tool, which I'm hoping some of you may have heard of and used as well, is called SWOT. Your ability to scan the environment using Pestle and then looking at, so therefore, as a leader, as a team, as an organization, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunity areas and what are our threats? How do we go ahead and work with what's being given to us, what the environment is creating for us via Pestle as one of the tools? And therefore, how do I create my strategic plan? How do I create my implementation plan? How do I create my cascade flow? How do I create my communication plan? All of those are components that then go on into making your strategy, as we spoke about the last time. Could I share an example of a SWOT exercise? So usually you need to do a SWOT exercise, but let's say your problem statement is, okay, let's say you are an organization that is already into making some product. Let's say you're into books. Okay, you are selling books. You're in the business of making books and selling them and distributing them and so on and so forth. And traditionally, you've been doing a particular genre of books. And now, and they're usually for adults. And now you decide to foray into, or you're tickled into foraying into children's books. You would do a SWOT. What are our strengths that will help us sell children's books to the tune of, and you give yourself a target, let's say a crore. 100, yeah, okay, let's say a crore of rupees is what you want to create business in, because your other turnover is really large. So a crore is like just a realistic, doable target for you. So you ask yourself, what are my strengths? And you could say my strengths are distribution, my strengths are client base, my strengths are, and then you say, no, no, my strength is not my client base, because up until now, my clients have all been adults, like all grown up people, people in corporates, and so on and so forth. So you actually put down your client base in your weakness section and say, I don't have a market right now, a ready database, a ready market right now um, for children's books. But then you realize some of the adults that I cater to, or grown-ups that I cater to, are obviously going to be parents. So can I reach out to those? It's an opportunity area for me, and not just children's books. I can also keep, like if I'm keeping, for example, the Harry Potter series, I have an opportunity also to keep the accessories. But the threat is there are already too many players in the market who are already catering to children and children's books. Um, and a lot of them are getting gobbled up by Amazon or somebody else. So that's a threat for me. If I spread my wings too wide, also another threat is I may end up bifurcating my team's focus from what's already a bestseller and a winner for us, which is the grown-up category, and I'm now dividing their attention to go into children's books. So you actually, when you're sitting down to create your strategy, and when you've scanned your environment and you've done your pestle tool to get inputs for what you should do and what you shouldn't be doing, you can then create this SWOT like that. I wish I could have given you a visual of what this SWOT exercise looks like, but for now, I hope, Rohan, this helps. You can actually go, I think there are some online tools. If I were to check even right now, I think you can do online SWOTs and get prompted. Yeah, online SWOT analysis is something that you can do. Google tells me you can create custom SWOT makers. So there's something called visualparadigm.com, there's something called vengage.com, and there's something simply called the swotanalysis.com, which gives you a free template. So you're more than welcome to go over there. I promise you have nothing to do with these people. So I'm not promoting them at all. It's just something that Google threw up. Okay, great. So you're very welcome, Rohan. I hope that helped. Who typically defines the strategy? How big should the group be? That is, Rajesh, I think it would also depend on the size of the organization. So if I have 5 people in my leadership team, all 5 of them had better be there in the strategy meeting. But let's say if I'm a really, really large conglomerate, then I will have people who are leading specific functions, right? So you need to see what's your playing field. You need to see what's the size of the organization. If you have, let's say, you have the traditional departments, you've got sales, you've got marketing, you've got communication. That could be a separate department, or it could be clubbed with marketing itself. You've got research, you've got technology, you've got manufacturing. Let's say you have all of these departments. You will need to have a representative from each of these departments to bring the reality of that department to the table. And that's what, that's the other part of the mantle of strategic planning on leaders. Do I know my department well enough to be able to get the reality of the department, and not just my own department? Let's say I'm the purchase department. What are the realities of my department in terms of my dependencies on other teams and their dependencies on me, our turnaround time, the kind of manpower I have to be able to troubleshoot and solve problems, um, the kind of timelines that we need, and in a lot of organizations, there's very minuscule detailing with the government or interaction with the government. In other organizations, there's huge interaction with the government, and the organization in that industry is subject to a lot of government regulations. So do I have information on that? Do I need to have a legal representative who can help me with the laws, etc.? So all of these people need to come together. How big should the team be? One person per department who's able to bring in that kind of input suffices at the senior most level. At the executive level that you've written, should it only be executive level or even managers? But then that individual who's representing the entire department will go back to their department and get these inputs from people at different levels. So typically, how would I, if I were to create a strategy and I were a practice or a department in charge, I would know that we have a strategic planning session happening in usually in February for organizations that follow the financial year. They would have it usually around February, March. For those that follow the calendar year, they would usually have it, October, November, something like that. So usually in the quarter previous, before you start a new year, is when you would do it. Now, I already know my session is going to happen on such and such date in such, and even if not the date, in such and such month. If I'm a good leader, and herein comes my responsibility. Number one, I will have my ear to the ground. I will keep doing all my analysis. I will keep taking in the inputs from the environment, from my team, from my competitors, and so on and so forth throughout the year. But before this strategy or the strategic planning meeting, I will make sure that I have gathered information and from my own team within my department. So I could have a whole coterie of 10 people. I could have it only of 2 people. It depends on, number one, how many people I have. Number two, how large and how critical is my role in my department. Number three, how much of a team player am I myself? Am I a lone ranger? Am I a leader who prefers to do all the work by myself in terms of all the thinking, etc.? And I don't really care too much about getting inputs from people who have their ear on the ground. So the number, is there an exact number? No. Is there an exact science to finding that number? No. You need to do that permutation combination of what's your size, what's the number of people that you have, how many people do you really need, how many people can bring you that kind of information which is different. And you would time yourself in such a way that by the time it's time for the strategy meeting, you are prepared with all your points, you are prepared with all your inputs, you have done your entire scan, etc., and then you're going in. So, who typically defines the strategy? It is initiated by leaders at the top, but inputted by everyone that the departmental leader or the organizational leader considers as an input point. I hope that helps. So, we've spoken about what are some of the tools that you can use and what you're responsible for doing. We've spoken about 2 skills that are so important for a leader in their responsibility as the holder of or as the strategic planner. You're so welcome, Rajesh. Um, what we also want to talk about is when we speak about responsibility, Rajesh himself had asked a question, but I'm going to use which is about somebody being a partner and not being willing to take accountability. I think I'm going to use that also, or link with that also, how it comes to your responsibility as a leader. So when you're a leader, the first thing is, the base thing is, do you understand your role? Do you understand you are responsible for strategic planning, even if you're, as people say, only a manager, only a first time manager? Do you understand that still it is your responsibility? And then what are the steps that you take to be able to, number one, know that there is a strategy that needs to be planned? Let's say, and I'm now going to take it from the bottom up. Let's say you're a manager of people, first line manager. Your responsibilities will include finding out when is it that the strategy meeting will occur. So you may need to go upwards to ask them and to give them your intent. The reason why I'm asking is so that I can gather the right information to share with you, so that we have the right inputs for our implementation later. If you're a first time manager, don't forget the entire responsibility of getting that strategy executed lies on you and on your people who are actually executing it. Don't be mistaken, as George Bush said, make no mistake. So make no mistake. It is your responsibility. You cannot get away with saying, oh, but I'm only a first line manager. Yeah, you're the one who's getting all the work done. So please make sure that you know what the strategy is, you understand what the strategy is, you know the repercussions of not having the strategy be understood, be implemented, and then be lived on a day-to-day basis. If you are a middle manager, which means you're a manager of managers, your responsibility lies in getting the information from the ground of what's real and then taking it back upwards. You're the segue, you're that bridge. I wish you could see I'm like kind of standing like this with my arms. You're the bridge. Your one hand is being, and when I say the bridge, one hand is being held by the people on the ground who are doing the execution through the managers, the first line managers. Your other hand is being held by the seniors. So the senior leadership is giving you the input which you need to cascade, and the junior level of management or the executioners, the implementers is a better word. The implementers are actually giving you input from the ground. This is doable, this is not, this is realistic, this is not, this can be done, this just can't be done. There are no problem solving situations. Whatever number of trainings you put us in, this can't be solved, and so on and so forth. So as a mid-level manager, your responsibility, number one, understand your role. So this happens across levels. Understand your role. Number two, your responsibility for strategic planning is get the input from the top, get the input from the bottom, bring them both together and give a realistic picture to both the top and the bottom. If you're a senior leader, your responsibility, number one, know your role. Number two, make sure you're listening. Make sure you're not disregarding the inputs that you're getting from the bottom. And I must also say, as you know, when you reach those seniors levels of management, you also learn to take input that you're getting from the ground up with a little bit of pinch of salt. Why? Because you know sometimes it'll be coming from being disgruntled about too much work, too little pay, etc., because you've also been there at some point of time in your career. So you learn to take it with a pinch of salt, but your responsibility is to not disregard it. If you go with saying, oh, these people are just lazy bums, or oh, come on, these people also, or and here's a heads up for all Generation X senior leaders out there listening. Our tendency, and I include myself in that, our tendency can be to brush off young inputs as they don't have enough experience. What do they know? Please don't do that. That's your other responsibility. Don't brush off the ideas, the inputs of people who are lesser experienced than you just because they're lesser experienced than you. Their age may not support their experience, but their interactions do. Their ability to be with it on the social circuit does. Their ability to be looking at the world from a really, really wide view and narrowing in those inputs really matters. And I say it as a Gen Xer myself. So if you're in the Gen X or beyond senior leadership position, please be open. That's another one of your responsibilities. I'm going to come back in a moment. Meena's question is, I recently became a manager for the first time in my life. Congratulations, Meena. I'm quite concerned about defining the strategy for my team. I'm having my first one-to-one with my team members tomorrow. How can I use this meeting to get off on the right foot? Okay, yeah, that's a big one, Meena. So I think what you'd like to do, and I'm just gathering my thoughts together as I'm pausing. Meena, the first thing you need to do is build trust with your team. Especially if you're doing your first one-to-one with your team member, it's important that you create a safe space for your team member, which means be in listening mode. Don't be in tell mode. Leave your phone outside, come what may. If there is an emergency, God forbid, if you feel that there might be an emergency and someone might need you on the phone, leave it with a trusted member saying, look, I don't want to be disturbed because I'm going for a one-to-one. Only if you see phone calls from this and this number showing up over and over again, do please come and knock and let me know that this is what's happening. Otherwise, you can keep my phone for the next 1 hour or whatever time. Leave your phone outside. It's one of the biggest mistakes managers make. Managers and leaders both. Leave your phone outside. Don't be carrying your phone inside. Pay full attention to your team member. Make them feel they are safe in sharing their information with you. So this is not so much about strategy. We'll come to how you define the strategy for your team, but for the one-to-one, make sure that you are, like I said, in listening mode tomorrow, and ask your team member what you can do to support them in their role, in their execution of the strategy. or of the plans that have already been shared with them. Now, they may have a laundry list. They may come and tell you, you know what, Shalu is such a bad team member. She never gives me inputs and it's impossible to work with her. Don't start taking sides with this individual against Shalu. They may have a personal thing going. So you have to also appear unbiased while listening. Don't overpromise and don't promise anything that you know you can't deliver or that you don't even know that you can't deliver. Listen, just say, you know what, today I'm just taking inputs. I'm happy to write them down. And then let's get back on some of the things you've asked for in a few days. Is that okay with you? So create rapport, build rapport, create trust, set the tone of how you'd like to work with that individual in terms of communication, in terms of feedback. Very important. Be open to receiving that feedback. Now, the reason why I decided to answer in such great length today while talking about strategic planning is because that's one of the things that managers do even when they're talking about strategy to their people, especially if the strategy is going to make them uncomfortable, especially if the strategy is going to demand them to change a lot of what they know, change a lot of the way they've been doing things, and creates this lack of safety around, will I need to change myself? Will I lose my job? Will I this? Will I that? So creating that safe space, being open, listening, all of those things are very, very important skills in your responsibility as a strategic planner, as a leader within an organization. Oh, absolutely. Please, Sumina's question was, would you say strategy is not something we should address in the first meeting and take it more as a listening meeting? Absolutely. Right now, you don't have rapport. If you go and you start talking about strategy in the first meeting, your team member is going to say, oh, thank you for throwing your weight around. You've just become a manager. And especially if you have, you were peers and you've now been promoted over this person and you've become a manager, the lack of trust is going to be immense. That person is going to feel betrayed. That person is going to be feeling, I'm not good enough. I wasn't good enough, so I didn't get promoted, but Nina did. That person is going to have a lot of stuff against you and against life in general, especially if, like I said, if you became a manager from amongst your peers. If you did, do not talk about strategy tomorrow. Use tomorrow as a listening space. Use tomorrow as a setting ground rules or setting the ways of working, like we call it in facilitation. Ways of working out when you say, okay, here's how I like to work. How do you like to work? What's the meeting point? If we want to escalate, this is what we'll do. If we have a conflict, this is how we'll handle it. If we have a win, this is how we'll celebrate it, etc., etc. I hope it goes well too for you, Meena. I'm glad it makes sense to you. So bringing it back into what I was speaking about. So we've spoken about the levels that strategy or strategic planning is the responsibility of leaders. We've spoken about some of the skills that leaders require to be good at strategy planning and to be responsible with, to be able to show, to be able to prove that they are living their role as strategy planners or as people with strategic mindsets. But please remember, none of these skills are going to be useful if your mindset is not of strategic planning. If your mindset is, let me just do what I've been told to do, because, hey, that's the job of the guys above or the ladies above, you're not going to be, doing justice to your role as a leader. If you're going to go from the space of, I'm not good enough, I don't know how to do strategic planning, I've never done it in my life, I've always failed, I don't have a very organized, research oriented mind, you will fail in your responsibility as a leader. You will then end up being an executor, executor, or an implementer. It is one of the fears that a lot of leaders operate from, saying, I don't know how to do strategic planning. Unfortunately, there is so much fear that has been created around the whole thing around strategy. Oh, strategy is very difficult. Oh my God, I have a strategic planning meeting coming up. Oh my God, we have to talk about strategy. There's nothing to it. All you need to do is be aware of the world around you. All you need to do is be aware of the world external around you, internal around you, bridge the gap, know what needs to be done to achieve what we need to achieve. It just requires a little bit of presence of mind. So number one, work your fear away. If the fear is too deep, please seek out a senior leader within your organization and ask them to share their experience of strategy and strategic planning with you. Ask them questions, especially because it's your specific industry, it's your specific organization. Ask them to mentor you. How do I create a strategy for an organization like ours in an industry like ours? Let's say you're a mid-sized company, you're working for a mid-sized company. Ask them, if we are to scale up to becoming an MNC, what are some of the things we would think of? If you're in a promoter-led organization, please reach out to other people in the same industry in MNCs, because the mindset within a promoter-led organization is very different from the mindset in an MNC, which has committees and full-fledged ecosystems that drive the organization in itself. So don't just there is a phrase for it which I'm now forgetting. It's visualizing in my head, but I can't put it into words. But essentially, don't stay stuck to the same kind of organizations that you are in. If you're looking to learn to be a strategy planner or a leader with a strategic mindset, please know at this point of time, there is a dearth of good leaders who can strategize without fear and who can then cascade that strategy powerfully down to the last person. We spoke about that in the last session. So my invitation to you is, as I start to wrap up today's session, and then I'll see if there are any further questions, is for you to start pushing yourself a little bit. Gain the skills, gain the willingness, both. Your performance as a responsible strategy or strategic thinking, strategic planning leader will be driven both by your skills and your willingness to be there. And then you're going to be able to do strategic planning so much more responsibly and so much better. That's all that I had for today, folks. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I'm just going to go back to Rajesh's question and see if I can answer it in another way. Rajesh, one of the things that I'll invite you to do is to please talk to this gentleman with facts, with evidence, with examples. Invite him into receiving feedback from others around you. When you go to somebody and tell them, you don't take ownership at all. In their world, especially if they know that that's true, it is going to become and seem like a personal attack to them. They will become defensive. If they are operating from a fear of loss of job, fear of loss of reputation on the job, they will become defensive and they will retaliate. They will become even more insecure. And if they are that insecure and if they are at a slightly senior leadership position, like this gentleman as a partner, they will take it out on the people who are reporting into them. It'll come out in the way of bad appraisals. It'll come out in the way of pushing their people. It'll just come out in the way of passing the blame, taking the credit and passing the blame. It'll show up in those kind of behaviors. So please make sure that when you go to talk to these people, or people like this gentleman, be in invitation mode rather than attack mode. And your intent may not be to attack. It'll land on them. It'll seem to them like you are attacking them. And definitely look at getting this individual coached. I'm happy to talk to you more about this, Rajesh. If you're joining us for the first time, this is my email ID in the chat box now. You're more than welcome to write to me. You're also more than welcome to reach out to Team Creator for my contact details. I'm so glad to hear that, Rohan, that you found it interesting. Yes, most people have been taught to believe that strategy only happens at the senior levels and it's all very puffed up and important. Of course, it's puffed up and important. Of course, you feel glad that you're shaping the way that the organization is going to run, but that doesn't mean that leaders at lesser levels of experience cannot do strategy. In fact, it's more important that they know the strategy, they tweak the strategy, they inform the strategy, and then they share and communicate the strategy. So that's that for today, folks. Thank you so very much for logging in. Sorry about the technical issues, but like I said in the beginning, that's one of the things you can't control. So happiness to all of us. You're so welcome, Sid. I'm just so glad that I have the opportunity to meet with all of you week on week. Thursdays, Fridays is what it looks like our sessions are going to be. So please come back. I love talking to you guys. Thank you very much. Have a good evening ahead. It is Good Friday, so greetings of the weekend to you. I hope the days of prayer and these days bring you some sort of relief, some sort of peace and calm. And like I said right in the beginning, please continue to stay safe. Don't give up on your masks, your sanitizer, and social distancing. Happy weekend to you guys. Bye bye.